Let's dive into part 3 of the Alapin opening course. So far, we have covered the most common response of knight to c6, played in 38% of games. Hopefully you feel prepared to face that move at this point. We're now going to start covering the next most common move, played 21% of the time, d6. This response is somewhat weak and is probably a sign that your opponent is used to playing against the move knight to f3 instead of c3. And this is one of the advantages of playing the Alapin. Most Sicilian players are not as prepared for these lines and tend to play moves that are familiar to them even though the playing field has changed. That said, this is definitely not a game-losing move. The computer gives a slight edge at plus 0.5 after the move d4. In reality, black has a lot of options here, but in 4 out of 5 games, black ends up taking in the center. So that is where we will spend most of our time analyzing. We'll recapture to get a strong center, and here's where things get interesting. We have a very strong center. Chess principles tell us that controlling the center is extremely advantageous. Most openings will focus on a battle for the center. Usually this means either directly attacking the center with a center pawn, or indirectly attacking the center with a fianchetto of the bishop. Any opening that doesn't do this is generally weak and can be punished. Black has some good options here to strike our center, but a large majority of the time at the under 1200 level, black doesn't play these moves. He instead concedes the center advantage to us and plays something passive like knight to f6, the most common response. Black gets his knight out with a weak center. We should be looking at potential pawn pushes, mainly e5 in this position, attacking the knight. This move can't quite be played because after trading pawns, black can take away our castling rights with a queen trade. But this position is still great for us. We get to keep our center advantage intact for a while longer. We can still look to prepare e5 a few moves down the road. Noticing black is attacking our undefended e-pawn. We play knight to c3, defending the pawn. Black is now stuck in a sort of passive position and won't be able to make any serious threats anytime soon. However, his position is solid and hard to crack. We can't expect to convert our advantage immediately, but with several more moves of consistent good play, we will be set up for a strong middle game. Black can take several avenues here. Let's start by considering g6. Black's intentions are clear. He will move his bishop to g7 and then try to break down our center. Since black's position is solid and most of our pieces are on their starting squares, we just need to get pieces out. With several good options, we of course play the best move, bishop to b5 check. This move can be a little difficult to understand, but is a common idea when facing the Sicilian. The main idea summed up is it's a developing move that comes with tempo, since it is a check, and black's response is more or less forced, making it predictable and easy to prepare for. First, it's important to note that black can't block with knight to c6, because the knight would be pinned, and we could play d5, attacking the pinned piece. So black must block the check with a knight or the bishop. Blocking with the knights is not necessarily bad, but can be awkward, and blocks the bishop in, and is generally more difficult to play. So usually black will choose to block with the bishop. And with the bishops looking at each other, it can be difficult to leave the tension. You are probably tempted to trade bishops, but our bishop is defended, and trading bishops accomplishes nothing but helping black develop his knight. One great purpose for the bishop b5 check, forcing the bishop to come to d7, is that now the queens have another layer of pieces in between them, setting up an idea we have thought about. I think you have caught on to the correct idea. Let's put the move on the board. The move e5 really complicates things. Your opponent will likely start taking a lot of time to think, but you'll be prepared, knowing that our b5 bishop is currently in no danger since we can simply recapture with the knight. At any point, we come up with a different threat. e5 attacks the knight, which is quickly running out of squares. Black is starting to realize that giving us the strong center was a mistake. The knight will be forced to g4, and eventually forced to the rim on h6 if we play patiently. Black can try to resist this first by trading pawns. We trade back and the knight must go. Now it's important to not get trigger happy with h3, since the e-pawn has two attackers and only one defender. So first we must add a defender. There is only one way to do that. Now black's knight is in trouble, so black starts throwing out some threats like queen to b6. This adds an attacker to the bishop and the b-pawn. We can defend both simultaneously with the queen. Black can trade if he wishes, but at some point he will run out of threats, and we will finally have time to force the knight into the corner. The computer gives us good odds with a plus 1.1 advantage despite equal material due to black's very limited pieces. Let's go back to a different variation. In the last line, black immediately moved his bishop to g7, and we played the move bishop to b5 check, which caused some problems for black. Black may want to avoid that by immediately playing the immediate a6, the best move in the position, preventing our bishop from going to b5. In this case, we are forced to play more passive with the best move being bishop to e2, serving a subtle purpose. The problem with pushing e5 is the queen trade that could follow, which takes our castling rights. However, the bishop on e2 gives us a better way to recapture in the instance of a trade. Black will probably proceed normally. The move e5 is finally playable, punishing black for getting his knight out with a weak center. Black will likely want to trade pieces, but the result is the same. Black's knight is stuck in a bad position, but play is a little trickier this time without the queens on the board. Before we defended the pawn with bishop f4, then a second time with our queen. It turns out we won't have enough firepower to save our e-pawn. But we do have another idea since black doesn't have his queen controlling the center file. The idea is knight to d5, threatening a fork. Black is in a very tricky spot. He moves his king out of the fork, but is forced to give up some material. And the game will enter chaos with a continuation something like this. White now has a distinct, though chaotic, advantage. Let's go back. We have considered g6. Let's move to another common response to be aware of, e6. e6 is a fine move which takes control of the center in a more passive way. It also prepares a spot on d5 for the knight, in the case that we push e5. So now our e5 push idea doesn't really work. The game is fairly unexciting and we can just develop normally. I like the move bishop to d3 here. Black wants to castle quickly, so he gets his bishop out of the way. We simply keep developing. And castling as well is simplest for white. Black gets his knight out, continuing development. Black may be looking to go to b4 with his knight to grab our bishop. We want to keep our bishop pair, so let's prevent the knight move with a3. Both sides are nearing the end of their development, and things will need to pick up somehow. Black usually plays a6 here, copying our idea. We continue to develop with the future in mind. Let's go queen to c2, creating a battery with the bishop. Note, our pawn on a6 is extremely important here to prevent a fork of queen and bishop. Black continues to play passive with h6, and here is where 1200 and under players start to struggle. We are developed, and it seems it's time to start attacking, but oftentimes a blatant and unsure attack leads to a quick demise. You are not going to be getting a quick win from this position. It's important to realize that, stay patient, and look for slow moves that improve your position. Well, let's take a look. Our dark squared bishop is still undeveloped. We would like to get the bishop to e3, but playing this immediately would be a problem since black will respond with knight to g4, attacking the bishop. So let's first play h3 to claim the g4 square and create an escape route for our king on h2 to prevent back rank mates later in the game. And at some point, black will start getting antsy. This position is a great example where half of games play the inaccurate and aggressive move b5. Black wants to make things interesting and finally start striking back, but b5 fails to a simple tactic that wins us a pawn. We can simply sacrifice our knight in order to open up the c-file with the now undefended knight. Black recaptures, and we quickly gain back our material. We went pretty deep into this line, which is somewhat unnecessary other than to show you the principles of how to play a passive game like was shown. It can be tempting to play a daring pawn push, but when it comes down to it, the most important thing is to not lose the game with a blatant move. Find subtle improving moves to maintain your position, and look out for clear tactics or pawn pushes that will be advantageous for you. I don't want to cover much more with e6. It is pretty passive and solid, making the lines uninteresting for deep study. So let's move on to the next most common move, which can maybe be considered a mistake. Black, without thinking, just develops his second knight. But he has a very weak center, and developing the knight here leads to a very easy attack to punish black, starting with d5. We have seen positions very similar to this in the last two videos. You may know by now that black's best move is to retreat the knight back to where he came from. But almost no one actually does this, probably because it is humiliating. More likely than not, black will go to e5, where we are all ready to push our f-pawn. Black retreats again, and now we just play chess with the knowledge that black's pieces are going to have a tough time getting to where they want to go. Black can try to challenge the center to hopefully uncramp his position. We just continue developing with a high-level idea. Bishop to b5 is a forcing move. Black must block with the bishop. This is forced because if black blocks with the knight, black is too weak on the light squares with his bishop trapped. We can take in the center, advance our pieces, and black can't do anything. We attack the e-pawn, which will be tough to save. He can push, but this weakens the light squares even more, and there is too much firepower. Black will lose the game. So black blocks with the bishop, and we follow a similar plan by taking in the center and attacking the e6 pawn. Black is getting very claustrophobic, so tries to consolidate. But we still have too many threats with an attack on e6. Black is nearly lost. He can try to save his pawn, but now we double up on attackers on c7, and black will be forced to lose material. Okay, that was a pretty bad line for black. He definitely has better options, so let's go back. We have considered g6, e6, and knight to c6. The next most common move here is the passive move a6. This move is more than common in the Sicilian defense. Black hopes to prevent any ideas with knight to b5 and bishop to b5, as these are very common attacks in white's plans. It's a solid move, even though it doesn't immediately fight for central control. White already has a nice advantage with center control. There are many moves that lead to good positions. However, there is one move with a 55% win rate. f4 is a bit of a strange move when playing against the Sicilian, but it makes sense when we break it down. f4 is often frowned upon because it weakens the king along this diagonal. However, with black's passive position, he is still several moves from being able to take advantage of that. So this move doesn't cause any immediate danger for us. It really benefits our central control by preventing black from any e5 ideas, and even sets up a possible e5 push for us. From here, we will want to put our knight on f3 to protect h4, as well as our bishop on d3 to get ready for an e5 pawn push. Black will probably respond with e6, finally taking some stake in the center, but this move carries no threat, so we just carry out our plan. Black castles, but has done nothing to prevent our main idea of pushing e5. Pushing here results in a win 64% of the time. Black's knight faces a very tricky situation. The computer recommends a retreat, but more commonly black tries to avoid the retreat and finds his way to d5. Black's king is stuck on the king side without many defenders. His pieces are all stuck on the king side, while white has most of his pieces pointing at the black king. While not a completely winning position, black will struggle to defend and will probably make more mistakes at some point. Let's cover one more idea in this video. Black has one more common response here, which is favored by the computer. However, in all practicality, it is tough to play as black. e5 directly challenges our center, which is strong. Now in this position, the computer recommends locking things down to maintain our space and our strong center. But a more human move that is difficult to deal with is to trade pawns, with the idea of trading queens to take away black's castling rights. The resulting position is a 63% win rate for white at the under 1200 level, despite an evaluation of only plus 0.6. It's just difficult for black to get his king to safety, and he may already feel rattled with his position. Our plan should be normal developing moves, and then coordinating pieces into a strong middle game. That's really all you need to know coming into this line. In summary, black trading the pawns on move 3 and then not immediately challenging the center is weak. Our strong center is a big advantage going into the middle game, and black has lost his chance to really fight against it. There are a few things we need to be aware of, mostly the moves g6 and e6, but with proper preparation, we'll get a good resulting position. Thanks for watching.